Excuse me, I brought my son. Is that okay? Her voice barely rose above a whisper. She braced for the judgment. The awkward silence, what came instead, made her breath catch. Richard Callahan lowered his newspaper slowly, eyes narrowing with exaggerated seriousness. He looked first at Maya, then at the boy clinging to her leg. Caleb, 5 years old, stood with wide eyes and a red Iron Man hoodie, clutching a plastic robot and his mother's hand. I see, Richard said, folding the newspaper and placing it down with deliberate calm. You brought a superhero to dinner without a reservation. That's a breach of fine dining protocol. Maya blinked, her heart stalling for a beat. A few minutes earlier, Maya had nearly turned around and gone home. Her babysitter had canceled last minute a stomach bug, and all her backup plans had crumbled. No neighbor she trusted, no family within 100 miles. She was about to send an apologetic text when Caleb looked up and said, "You look pretty, Mommy." She'd swallowed the lump in her throat, smoothed Caleb's hair, and whispered, "Let's just go say hi. Maybe he'll understand." She hadn't expected this. The line was clearly meant in jest, his voice light with amusement. But the words hung in the air like a misfired joke in a silent room. A few nearby diners turned to look. Someone chuckled sharp and mocking. Another voice, an older woman with a pearl necklace, muttered under her breath, "This isn't Chuck E. Cheese." The maitre d', a tall white man with a narrow face, arched an eyebrow. "Is there a problem, Mr. Callahan?" Before Richard could respond, Maya's shoulders stiffened. The same heat bloomed in her chest. That always came when she was being judged, not for anything she did, but for what she was. A black woman, with a child, standing beside a white man in an upscale restaurant. And then, the voice of memory came rushing back. "You know, I just don't think we're in the same place," her ex-date had said over lukewarm coffee 2 years ago. "You seem like a lot to handle. You've got your son. And this whole situation." She'd smiled, paid her half, and walked out before the tears came. Tonight, that feeling returned in full. The prickling skin, the shame she never earned. She should have canceled. Why did she think this would be any different? "I'm sorry," she said quietly, tugging Caleb's hand. "This was a mistake. We'll go." Richard stepped forward quickly, his smile fading. "Wait, Maya." She froze. "I was joking," he said, more gently now. "I was trying to be funny, I didn't think they'd laugh." He glanced sideways at the table where the older couple had snickered, his jaw tight. "And if I had known anyone would treat you like this, I'd have booked the entire restaurant instead of one damn table." Maya searched his face. There was no mockery there, only concern. And something else. Apology. Richard turned to the maitre d' and said, firmly, "This is my guest. Please bring a third chair and a booster seat." The man hesitated, then nodded stiffly. "Of course." Maya lowered her gaze, but Caleb looked up and whispered, "Mommy, are we still eating?" She forced a breath. "Yes, baby, we're staying." They followed Richard to a corner booth. He guided them in with a confidence that didn't seek permission. The table for two quickly became a table for three. The host returned with a booster seat and a kid's menu, though he placed it down with the enthusiasm of someone folding laundry. Richard ignored the tension and crouched beside Caleb. "So," he said, flashing a smile, "Iron Man, huh? Are you in disguise tonight?" Caleb studied him seriously. "Iron Man doesn't wear jeans." "Ah, rookie mistake," Richard whispered. "You caught me." Maya watched, still tense, her pulse pounding. She hadn't expected him to defend her. Most people would have stayed silent. But not Richard. He hadn't just stood up for her. He had seen her. They sat down. Caleb took to his crayons immediately, scribbling on the paper menu. Richard called the waiter over, ordered grilled salmon for himself, then helped Caleb choose between macaroni and grilled cheese. Maya, still recovering from the moment at the entrance, ordered the same as Richard. "You okay?" he asked quietly, after the waiter left. She nodded. "You didn't have to say anything back there." "I did," he said, "because I invited you, and because what happened wasn't okay." Maya gave him a small, cautious smile. But her thoughts lingered on that moment, the look in people's eyes when they saw her. as if her presence tarnished the room. It wasn't new. It was familiar and exhausting. You'd be surprised how many times people like me walk into places like this and feel like intruders, she said finally. Richard tilted his head. And people like me walk into places like this and feel entitled. They sat in silence for a moment. I hate that I almost walked out, she said, voice low. I'm glad you didn't, he said. The food came. Caleb munched happily while Richard and Maya talked about her job at the hospital, about the city, about Caleb's obsession with robots, and her fear of letting people in. I've been told I come with too much baggage, she said, eyes on her son. Richard followed her gaze. That's not baggage. That's your heart walking around outside your body. Maya blinked, stunned. Caleb, oblivious to their moment, looked up and asked, Is Mommy crying? No, sweetheart, she said softly. These are just happy tears. Caleb accepted that and returned to coloring. As they walked out into the night later, Maya reached for her son, but he lifted his arms to Richard instead. Can I ride on your shoulders? Richard looked at Maya for permission. She hesitated, then nodded. Caleb squealed as he was lifted up. Look, Mommy, I'm taller than the moon. Maya laughed, warmth blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, the weight on her shoulders felt shared. At the car, Richard helped buckle Caleb in, then closed the door with care. Thank you, Maya said, for standing up for us, for not pretending it didn't happen. I don't pretend, Richard said. I just choose who I fight beside. And tonight, I'm honored to fight beside you. And for the first time, Maya allowed herself to believe this might not be another dead end. It might just be a beginning. If this moment touched you, tap like and comment where you're watching from. Who knows? Someone near you might be watching this story too. The following morning, Maya stirred a spoon through her coffee as Caleb sat across the kitchen table, crunching his cereal and humming the Iron Man theme with his mouth full. The soft morning light filtered through the dusty blinds of their apartment in South Shore, casting golden slats across the small kitchen floor. Her thoughts wandered back to the night before, the rich warmth of Richard's voice, the quiet way he handled confrontation, and the surreal moment when her son rode on his shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. She could still hear his words. That's not baggage. That's your heart walking around outside your body. Maya set her coffee down, watching Caleb draw with his usual early morning focus. A crude sketch of a tall man with square glasses and a little boy on his shoulders took shape. Who's that? She asked gently, though she already knew. It's me and Mr. Richard. He said I could call him Rich, but I like Mr. better. Maya smiled. Her stomach fluttered, and she couldn't tell if it was hope or worry. It had been one dinner. One unexpected, strange, beautiful dinner. But the way Richard had looked at her, not with pity, not with caution, but with genuine curiosity and ease, it had shaken something loose inside her, something that had been locked up for years. Her phone buzzed. Richard Callahan. Would it be weird if I said I already want to see you again? Her heart skipped. She stared at the message for a full 10 seconds before replying. Only if it's weird that I already said yes in my head. Seconds later, another message arrived. There's a little park near the lakefront. Small. Quiet. I'll bring sandwiches. You bring your sidekick? Maya glanced at Caleb. Want to go to the park today, buddy? He beamed. Can I bring Bolt? He held up his robot. Of course, she said, kissing the top of his head. The park Richard mentioned turned out to be a narrow stretch of grass near Promontory Point, shaded by tall cottonwoods. The lake glimmered beyond a short walking path, the autumn wind rustling the leaves above them. When Maya arrived with Caleb in tow, Richard was already there, laying out a simple plaid blanket on the grass. He wasn't wearing a suit today, just a gray pullover, dark jeans, and sneakers that had clearly seen better days. He looked real. Less billionaire, more neighbor you'd trust with your garbage cans. Perfect timing, he said, standing up as they approached. I was just about to give your son's robot a background check. Caleb ran forward, holding out Bolt. He's clean. He works for the good guys. Richard nodded solemnly, accepting the robot and pretending to examine it. No known aliases. Ironclad resume. Maya laughed, her arms crossed as she watched the two bond. You're either a natural with kids or a former spy. Richard glanced at her. A bit of both. They sat on the blanket. Caleb munching on a peanut butter sandwich while Richard handed Maya a carefully wrapped turkey and avocado. She raised an eyebrow. Whole grain, light mayo. No cheese. I did my research. Maya took the sandwich, impressed. Stalker or considerate? I prefer thorough. They ate in a comfortable silence, the kind that felt earned. Caleb ran off toward the slide after lunch, leaving Maya and Richard side by side, watching him play. Thank you, Maya said quietly. For what? For last night. For not pretending like nothing happened when it got uncomfortable. Richard's expression sobered. I hate that it got uncomfortable at all, but I'm glad you stayed. She nodded, folding her hands in her lap. I almost didn't. I almost walked out when I saw the way the host looked at me, the way that woman laughed. I saw it, he admitted. It made me want to buy the place just so I could fire him. Maya laughed, but there was weight behind her amusement. I'm used to that kind of thing. That's the worst part. You shouldn't have to be, he said, his voice low. No one should. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, almost absently, she spoke. I had this date once. Nice guy. CPA. Like jazz. We had a great first conversation. Then I told him I had a kid, and he looked at me like I'd just told him I had a felony conviction. Didn't even finish his coffee. Richard looked at her. Then he didn't deserve to sit at your table. Maya smiled faintly. That table was a Dunkin' Donuts. Still counts, he said, nudging her shoulder. Caleb's laughter rang out across the playground as he whooshed down the slide. He's happy, Richard said. I work hard to make sure of it, Maya replied. Sometimes I worry I'm not enough. He turned to her then, his voice firm. You're more than enough. You're doing everything. And you're doing it beautifully. Her eyes watered before she could stop them. You're gonna make me cry again. Good. Maybe I'm just trying to break the record. She looked at him fully, and he held her gaze. No pretense. No hidden motives. Just presence. I wasn't expecting this, she said. Neither was I. They sat like that for a while, watching Caleb, sharing space. When it was time to go, Caleb ran back and threw his arms around Richard's waist without hesitation. Bye, Mr. Richard. Thank you for the sandwiches. Richard smiled and knelt. You're welcome, kiddo. Maybe next time you can bring Bolt's resume so I can add him to the team. Deal. Back at the car, Maya buckled Caleb in, then turned to Richard. I don't know what this is yet, she said. You don't have to, he replied. We're just showing up. She nodded. That's a start. As she pulled away, she saw him in her rearview mirror standing by the lake, hands in his pockets, watching her drive off with a small smile on his face. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't feel like she was driving away from something. She felt like she was driving toward it. The next few days passed like autumn leaves drifting through the air, quiet, natural, fleeting. Maya went back to her shifts at South Shore General, juggling night rounds, medicine carts, and patient charts. But between the fluorescent lights and endless beeping of machines, her mind would sometimes wander to Richard's soft laugh, to the way he called Caleb champ, to the sandwich with no cheese but just enough thoughtfulness to make her feel seen. Caleb hadn't stopped talking about Mr. Richard, on the way to daycare, during bath time, even when falling asleep. Do you think Mr. Richard can come to my school? He asked one night. Eyes half closed, voice drifting like a feather. Maya smoothed his curls. Maybe someday, baby. She didn't want to promise anything. She had learned early as a single mom that children feel disappointment more deeply than adults ever admit. But she also couldn't deny what was happening inside her. Hope. It crept in between the tired moments. It shimmered at the edge of every memory of Richard's eyes. The way he looked at her, not through her. Not around her. But at her. It terrified her. Saturday morning arrived, bringing with it a knock on the door and the scent of something warm and unexpected. When she opened it, Richard stood there, holding a brown bag in one hand and a tall coffee in the other. I come bearing gifts, he said. Did you bring peace and sanity? Maya asked, rubbing sleep from her eyes. I brought bagels, he said, and coffee, strong enough to raise the dead. She stepped aside, letting him in. You're too cheerful for 8 a.m. Don't be fooled. I'm only awake because I had a board call with Tokyo at 6. As he stepped inside, Caleb burst out of the hallway in his pajamas, arms spread wide like airplane wings. Mr. Richard? Captain Caleb. Richard dropped to one knee. Permission to land? Caleb nodded vigorously and threw himself into Richard's arms. Maya stood back, watching the scene unfold like something from a dream. They sat at the small kitchen table, three mismatched chairs, a scratched tabletop, crayons still scattered from yesterday's coloring session. Richard didn't flinch at the clutter, didn't glance at the aging cabinets or the peeling linoleum. He simply passed around bagels like it was the most natural place on earth to be. "This is my favorite one," Caleb said, holding up a crayon drawing. Richard took it with care, examining it like it was a museum piece. The picture showed three stick figures. One tall, one medium, one small. All holding hands under a smiling Sunday. "Is this us?" Richard asked. Caleb nodded proudly. "That's me. Mommy. And you. You're the tallest." "Well, I do eat my vegetables," Richard replied. Maya smiled, her heart tightening in that familiar way. She used to think love arrived with grand gestures, with fireworks. Now, she wasn't so sure. Maybe it came quietly in crayons and bagels and coffee handed to you without asking. Later, while Caleb watched cartoons in the living room, Maya and Richard sat on the small balcony, wrapped in blankets against the crisp air. The city buzzed quietly in the distance. Cars passed. Life moved. "You don't have to keep showing up like this," she said after a while. "I mean, it's kind of wonderful, but it's also unexpected." Richard turned to her. "I don't do things out of obligation. No, I just—" She hesitated, pulling her knees up. "I'm not used to people staying." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached into his wallet and pulled out something small and worn. A faded Polaroid. A girl, about 4 years old, smiling with missing teeth and hair full of curls. She wore a yellow dress and held a toy giraffe. "My niece," he said. Her name was Lily. Maya looked up, her breath catching. "Was? She died. 3 years ago. Car accident. My sister, her mom, was driving. A guy ran a red light. He swallowed hard. I spent a year thinking I could have done more. That if I'd been closer, if I'd paid more attention, something might have changed." Maya's voice was soft. "I'm so sorry. She was the closest thing I ever had to a child," Richard continued, "and I didn't realize how much of myself I'd wrapped up in her until she was gone." Maya reached over, placing her hand gently over his. "She used to draw us holding hands under the sun," he said with a faint, sad smile, "just like Caleb did." Silence stretched between them, not awkward, but sacred. "I don't think I'm ready for whatever this is," Maya admitted, "but I don't want to run from it either." "I'm not asking for promises," Richard said, "just moments, one at a time." She nodded. Inside, Caleb's voice rang out. "Mom, Mr. Richard. I made us pancakes with ketchup." Maya groaned. "Please tell me he didn't." Richard laughed and stood up. "I better go save the kitchen." She watched him disappear into the apartment, and for a moment, she allowed herself to breathe. She didn't know where this was going, but for the first time in years, it felt like the road ahead wasn't empty. It was full of color. The following week felt oddly quiet. There were no bagels on Saturday. No text messages from Richard between patient rounds. No surprise visits. No coffee strong enough to wake the dead. It wasn't that Maya expected him to keep showing up, but a part of her had hoped. She tried not to dwell on it. On Wednesday evening, she finished her 12-hour shift with aching feet and a deeper ache in her chest. Caleb was already asleep when she got home. Her neighbor, Miss Donna, had tucked him in after dinner in a cartoon marathon. Maya tiptoed into his room, kissed his forehead, and quietly closed the door. She changed into an old t-shirt and sweatpants, then collapsed onto the couch. Her phone was silent. She turned it over so she wouldn't keep checking. It had only been 6 days, but it felt longer. Her mind churned through every detail. Had she said too much? Was she too vulnerable on the balcony? Was it Lily? Did her own reality, Caleb, the apartment, the noise somehow highlight what Richard had lost? She grabbed a blanket and tried to distract herself with a rerun of a cooking show, but the host's voice was drowned out by her own memory. "I'm not asking for promises, just moments." And yet, here they were stalled in silence. The next morning, while Caleb played with his toy cars, Maya scrolled through her messages. Still nothing from Richard. She clicked open their last thread. Her last reply was a simple, "Thank you again for showing up. Nothing since." She sighed and placed the phone on the counter, determined to get through the day without expecting anything more. Until the call came. She was standing in line at the grocery store, a cart full of cereal, fruit, and a few hopeful items for a Saturday breakfast, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She almost declined it, but something in her gut told her not to. "Hello? Is this Maya Williams?" The voice was deep, controlled. "Yes. Who's calling?" "My name is Elliot Crane. I'm Richard Callahan's attorney." Maya's heart skipped. "Is Richard okay?" "Yes. He's fine. I'm calling on his behalf. He's asked me to connect with you regarding a personal matter. May I ask if you're available for a brief conversation this afternoon?" He'd prefer to meet in person. Her mind raced. "Is this about his niece?" "I can't disclose details over the phone, ma'am. He just asked me to help coordinate." Something about the tone, formal, stiff, sent a chill through her. I guess I'm available. Thank you. I'll text you the address. 4 p.m. It's a private office." The call ended. Maya stood frozen in the checkout line as the cashier cleared her throat. "You paying cash or card, honey?" Maya blinked and reached for her wallet. The address led her to a discreet office building in River North, far from the noise and rhythm of her everyday life. The receptionist guided her to the third floor, where she found herself standing in a sleek, glass-walled conference room with black leather chairs and shelves filled with legal books no one read for pleasure. Richard entered at exactly 4:01, looking tired and slightly out of sync with his usual polished charm. No suit today, just a black button-down and dark jeans. He offered a faint smile but didn't reach for a hug. Maya didn't either. "You look good," he said softly. "Thanks," she replied, folding her arms. "You've been quiet." "I know. I'm sorry. Things got complicated." He gestured to the seat across from him. She sat, but her posture was tight, alert. "I didn't bring you here to talk contracts or sign anything," he said quickly. "I just didn't want to have this conversation in a noisy cafe or over text." "What conversation?" she asked, her voice firmer than she felt. He exhaled. "My ex-fiancée Heather found out we've been spending time together." Maya's stomach dropped. Richard continued. "She and I broke things off 3 years ago. But legally, she still has minor claims through an old estate tie-in with one of my companies. When she saw pictures online, she called my assistant and said some things. Threats." Maya leaned back, stunned. "Pictures? From who?" "Someone must have seen us at the park. It's Chicago. People talk." She shook her head slowly. "And now what? You're here to preemptively distance yourself?" His eyes flashed. "No. I'm here to be honest. I didn't expect this to happen, Maya. I didn't expect you. And I didn't expect to care this much. This quickly." She looked away. Her throat tightened. "But I also know," he said gently, "that it would be unfair not to tell you. If I disappear for a few days, it's not because I'm scared of you. It's because I'm dealing with a woman who still thinks she can control parts of my life, and I don't want her anywhere near yours." Maya looked at him for a long moment. "You should have told me sooner." "I know," he admitted. I didn't want to bring that weight into something that felt so new, so clean." She stood slowly, voice calm but cracking underneath. "You think my life is clean?" "No, I think you are." She laughed once, soft, bitter. "Richard, I'm a black single mother. I live in a third-floor walk-up with one working heater. I fight to get overtime hours, and I get judged every time I walk into a room with someone like you. My life is not clean. I didn't mean it that way. I know, but you still should have known better." He looked away, ashamed. "I told you I wasn't ready for all this," she said. "And then you gave me hope. You made me believe it was okay to trust again." "Maya, I'm still here. I'm not walking away." "But you did," she said quietly. "You just called it silence." She left the room before the tears came. He didn't follow. Back outside, the wind hit her face like a truth she didn't want to hear. Sometimes the people who fight for you also fight their own ghosts. But that didn't mean she had to be the casualty. 2 days passed before Maya heard from Richard again. She told herself she didn't care, that she was too busy, too tired, too focused on work and Caleb. and keeping everything in one piece to care about a man who brought her bagels and then disappeared behind legal teams and ex-fiancés. But even as she tied Caleb's shoes or checked vitals at the hospital, her mind would drift to that glass-walled office, to the way Richard had looked at her like he wanted to say more but didn't know how. It wasn't the silence that hurt the most. It was that he'd made her feel safe, then reminded her just how quickly safety could vanish. Friday night rolled around, and she'd promised Caleb a treat. Dinner out. Nothing fancy. Just the diner on 83rd and Greenwood, with red vinyl booths and fries that tasted like childhood. The kind of place that welcomed noisy kids and tired mothers without blinking. She was sipping her coffee when her phone buzzed. A simple message. From him. Richard, may I join you both tonight? I understand if the answer is no. She stared at it for a long time. Caleb sat across from her, happily dipping his fries in too much ketchup. Mommy, can Mr. Richard come with us next time? She swallowed hard. Maybe tonight. She typed a reply with trembling thumbs. We're at Ruby's Diner. If you still want to. No flourish, no emoji, no effort to make it sound casual. 10 minutes later, the bell above the door jingled. He walked in, not in designer clothes but in a dark hoodie and jeans, like someone trying to go unnoticed. His eyes scanned the room until they found hers. She didn't smile. He approached the table slowly, cautiously. Hi. Caleb lit up. Mr. Richard. Hey, buddy, Richard said, offering a small wave. Mind if I join you? Caleb scooted over in the booth without hesitation. Maya said nothing, but she didn't stop him. Richard slid in next to her son and exhaled, like he'd been holding his breath since she last walked out of that office. The waitress came over. Recognized Richard. Aren't you that tech guy on Channel 5 last month? But he waved it off with practiced humility and ordered a black coffee and grilled cheese. Maya took another sip of her own and finally spoke. This isn't exactly your kind of place. Richard looked around the chipped countertops and flickering light above the jukebox. Looks like exactly the kind of place that tells the truth. She blinked, surprised. He turned toward her, eyes earnest. You were right. I should have told you sooner. About Heather. About everything. Maya didn't soften. Why didn't you? Because I'm used to managing things. I'm used to people who need me to be polished. Put together. But you see through all that. And I guess I panicked. Her jaw tightened. You ghosted me for 5 days. I did, he said quietly. And I hate myself for it. Caleb interrupted, holding up his drawing. I made you a picture, Mr. Richard. Richard took it like it was sacred. It was another crayon creation, 3 stick figures again, this time inside a square with little stars above them. That's us in the spaceship, Caleb explained. We're going to the moon. Richard looked at Maya. Is there room for one more on that flight? She looked down, folded her napkin. Her walls were still there, still strong, but one brick, just one, felt looser now. The check came. The waitress placed it at the edge of the table, instinctively sliding it closer to Maya. It happened in a blink, but Maya felt it. The assumption, the insult. Richard reached for it immediately. I've got it. The waitress raised a brow. You sure? Richard looked her dead in the eye. We came together, we leave together. The waitress, caught off guard, gave a tight nod and walked away. Maya blinked, slowly. It wasn't the money. It never had been. It was the gesture. He saw the subtle cut and dressed the wound without making her bleed more. She stood, gathering Caleb's jacket. You know, you talk a good game. I mean every word, he said. As they stepped out into the crisp Chicago air, Richard reached for Caleb's hand. Caleb, still full of fries and space stories, offered it freely. They walked in silence for a block until they reached her car. Maya buckled Caleb in, then turned back to Richard. Why did you really come tonight? She asked. Was it guilt, or because you missed the grilled cheese? He smiled, but his voice was steady. Because when you left that office, I felt like something good was slipping through my fingers, and for the first time in years, I realized I didn't want to let it. She stared at him. You scare me, Maya, he added. Because you're real, and because you make me want something I thought I'd lost the right to want. Her voice was barely above a whisper. What's that? A family. The wind carried the weight of that word between them. He didn't ask for an answer. He just stepped back as she opened the driver's side door. Caleb was already half asleep in the back seat, mumbling about galaxies and cheese planets. Maya got in and started the engine. As she pulled away, she glanced in the rearview mirror. Richard still stood there, one hand in his pocket, the other holding Caleb's drawing. He folded it carefully and tucked it into his coat. And this time she smiled. Sunday arrived with the kind of soft blue sky that made Chicago feel gentle, like it had put down its armor for just one day. Maya bundled Caleb in a light jacket and packed snacks into her worn tote bag. He danced around the apartment with his plastic robot tucked under one arm, singing a song he'd made up about space pirates and moonburgers. Richard had texted her the day before. "I'd like to take you both somewhere that's just ours. No white tablecloths, no eyes watching, just a park, a blanket. Some Sunday. You in?" She hadn't replied right away, but when morning came, she found herself reaching for her keys. The park was tucked between old brownstones and a quiet stretch of Lake Michigan shoreline, a hidden gem that didn't show up on most tourist maps. Richard was already there when she arrived, sitting cross-legged on a checkered blanket beneath a maple tree that still held onto its gold. He wore a plain navy hoodie and sneakers that had seen miles. When he saw her, he stood, brushing off his jeans, and offered a boyish smile. "You came." She tried to sound casual. Caleb insisted. He said, "Mr." Richard promised him robot adventurous. "I always keep my promises," he said, kneeling to greet Caleb with a fist bump. Maya laid the blanket down beside his and sat, crossing her legs as she watched Caleb run toward the tiny playground across the grass. "No bodyguards today?" she teased. "Nope, just snacks, juice boxes, and sunscreen." She raised an eyebrow. "Juice boxes?" I asked my assistant what 5-year-olds like. Apparently, it's that and dinosaurs. I got both. So, he pulled a small juice box and a toy T-Rex out of the basket like a magician revealing his trick. Maya laughed genuinely, effortlessly. The tension that had clung to her for days seemed to lift in the presence of simplicity. The sun, the wind, her son's giggles, and Richard, who was present in a way that felt grounded, not performative. "So," she said, picking at the corner of a granola bar, "tell me something about you I wouldn't find in a Google search." He lay back on the blanket, arms behind his head. I once wanted to be a jazz drummer." She blinked. "Seriously? I played in high school. Even did a summer program in New Orleans. But my father said music was a hobby, not a profession. And I listened. Do you regret it?" "I regret that I stopped listening to myself." Maya turned that over in her mind. "What made you stop?" "Fear," he said without hesitation. "Fear of failing. Fear of disappointing the people who believed I'd be something great." She nodded slowly. "I know that feeling." He looked over. "Yeah, I wanted to be a teacher. But when I got pregnant, my world shifted. Then came the bills, the decisions, the reality." She looked down at her hands. "People stopped asking what I dreamed of. They only asked how I planned to survive." Richard was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "But you did survive." She met his eyes. "You made a home. You raised a kind, brilliant kid. You didn't vanish, you adapted. That's not failure, Maya. That's grace." Her throat tightened. She turned away, blinking back sudden emotion. "Damn," she said, voice shaky. "You're good with words." He smiled softly. "I mean them." They watched Caleb for a while. He was showing another child his robot, narrating a story about alien pirates and magical shields. Richard cleared his throat. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." When's the last time someone just showed up for you? No strings, no expectations. Just showed up because they wanted to?" Maya swallowed hard. She couldn't remember. "Not really. Maybe my grandmother," she said finally. "She raised me, and no matter how busy life got, she'd show up on my porch every Saturday morning with warm biscuits and gospel humming from her throat. She sounds like a force." "She was," Maya said. "Passed last year. Cancer." "I'm sorry." "Me too." They sat in silence again, but it was the kind of silence that didn't need filling. It wrapped around them like the sunlight. "I want to be someone who shows up," Richard said suddenly. "Not just for you. For him, too. Maya didn't answer right away. Her heart was louder than her thoughts. She turned and looked at him. Not the CEO, not the man with lawyers and ghosts, but a man who had chosen a blanket and juice boxes over boardrooms. Caleb came running toward them, breathless. "Mommy, Mr. Richard, can we play spaceship tag?" Richard stood, dusted his pants, and offered his hand to Maya. "Permission to join your galaxy?" She took it, and as the three of them ran across the grass, laughing like children, Maya realized something. She didn't have to run from her life to make room for love. She just had to believe someone was willing to run toward it with her. Tuesday evening settled over South Shore like a tired sigh, warm kitchen light, the hum of distant traffic, and the soft buzz of a radio playing old soul music. Maya stood at the stove, stirring a pot of mac and cheese, while Caleb narrated a story about a robot war in outer space. Her mind, though, drifted elsewhere. To Richard. To how he'd shown up, again. To the way he had knelt in the grass with Caleb, laughing until tears creased his eyes. He'd texted her later that night. "Richard, I haven't laughed like that in years. You've got something special, Maya. You both do." Now, standing barefoot in her small kitchen, she reread the message and smiled despite herself. Then, her phone rang. Mon malaverne. She hadn't expected this. Her mother rarely called during the week unless something was wrong or unless someone new had entered Maya's life. She wiped her hands, picked up the phone. "Hey, Ma." Maya Nicole Williams, came the sharp voice. "I just saw a picture of you and some man on my Facebook feed." "With Caleb, is that the one you were telling Donna about?" Maya sighed, already knowing where this was headed. "Yes, ma'am. His name is Richard." "Richard who?" He looked white. "Is he white?" Maya paused. "Yes." A click of the tongue. "And rich?" "Also yes." "Lord help us," Laverne muttered. "You know how people talk." "They've always talked," Maya said flatly. Her mother continued, voice fast and edged. "A man like that doesn't show up in our part of town for fun. You think he's serious?" "I think," Maya hesitated, "I think he's different." Silence. Then softer. "Baby, I just don't want you hurt again." "I know, Ma." "And Caleb." "I know." There was a pause. The kind filled with 1,000 unspoken memories. Her mother had raised her with iron and softness, equal parts, warning and warmth. But in this, Maya felt the old tension return, the invisible line she had crossed just by letting someone in who didn't fit the mold. "You gonna bring him round next time I visit?" her mother asked finally. "Maybe." "Well, he better be able to eat fried catfish and not flinch when he hears gospel." Maya smiled despite herself. "I'll warn him." They hung up, and Maya exhaled. Later that night, after Caleb was asleep and the dishes were done, she sent Richard a photo. It was old her and her grandmother on the porch, sitting with their legs crossed, both holding styrofoam cups of sweet tea. The edges of the photo were worn, but the love in it was clear. "Maya, you asked who showed up for me." This was her. Grandma Rose. Every Saturday morning with biscuits and wisdom. She's the standard I hold people to. His reply came almost instantly. "Richard, well, she sounds like I've got some work to do, but I make a mean biscuit when properly challenged." Maya laughed softly. Then, without warning, her phone rang again. This time, it was a video call. She hesitated for half a second before answering. Richard's face appeared on the screen, lit by the golden glow of a lamp behind him. "Did you really just challenge me to earn your grandmother's ghost's approval?" he asked. "She wouldn't mind haunting you a bit," Maya said, curling into the couch. She had a thing for men who could cook. "Well, then I'm doomed. I burn toast." They talked for 40 minutes, about nothing, about everything. The way conversations slide when there's no script, just trust. Before they said goodnight, Richard paused. "Would you come to my place this weekend?" Maya blinked. "Your house?" "Yeah. I'd like you and Caleb to see where I live. Nothing formal. Just lunch. Maybe pizza. Maybe I show him my robot collection." "You have a robot collection?" "I have a very lonely Roomba and a few old prototypes from my company days. He'll love it." Maya hesitated. He noticed. "If it's too much, I understand." "No," she said softly. "It's not too much. It's just new." "I'll go slow," he said. "Promise." Saturday arrived faster than she expected. Richard lived in a restored brick townhouse in Lincoln Park. Tasteful, understated. The kind of money that didn't need to announce itself with gold gates or fountains, just well-worn wood floors, vintage furniture, and art that looked like it had been chosen with love. He greeted them at the door with Caleb's favorite juice and a pizza box in hand. "This is not gourmet," he warned, "but it's got extra cheese and no green stuff." Caleb gave him a thumbs up. They spent the afternoon exploring the house. Caleb played in Richard's home office, fascinated by an old tech prototype that looked vaguely like a transformer. Maya wandered into the kitchen, where Richard joined her, leaning on the counter as he poured 2 glasses of tea. "I think he likes me," Richard said. "He hasn't stopped talking about you all week." He handed her a glass. "And what about you?" Maya looked at him over the rim of her cup. Still deciding. He grinned. "I'll take that." As Caleb fell asleep on the couch beside them during a movie, Maya watched Richard carefully drape a blanket over the boy. No hesitation, no performance, just quiet presence. She turned to him. "Why are you doing this?" He looked at her, brow furrowing slightly. "Doing what?" "This," she gestured to the room. "Me, Caleb, us. You don't have to." "No, I don't," he said, "but I want to, because for the first time in years, I don't feel like I'm performing, or protecting a brand, or trying to impress someone." He sat down beside her. "I just feel present." Maya didn't answer, but her fingers found his under the blanket. She didn't let go. Not yet. The following week felt like a breath held too long. Richard had texted, called, even sent a silly video of Caleb's favorite robot doing a dance he had animated himself. Maya responded politely, kind, but careful. She wasn't pushing him away, but she wasn't pulling him closer either. Something had shifted, and Richard could feel it. He sat alone in the corner booth of a quiet downtown bar on Thursday evening, the kind of place where the lighting stayed low, and the bourbon was older than some of its patrons. He sipped his drink, tapping his fingers against the glass. Across from him, Ryan Marks, his oldest friend, college roommate, and current COO of Callahan Solutions, tilted his head and studied him like an investment report. "So," Ryan said, "you're seeing someone?" Richard nodded. "With a kid?" Another nod. "And she's black." Richard's jaw tightened. "Is that a problem?" Ryan shrugged, but it was the kind of shrug that wasn't casual. It was calculated. "Only if you're not ready for what comes with that." Richard set his glass down. "What exactly comes with that, Ryan?" "You know what I mean. Optics, perception. Your board already watches your every move. The media's still circling after the Heather fallout. You think now's the time to be playing house with someone who doesn't fit the narrative?" Richard leaned back, expression darkening. "I'm not crafting a narrative," he said. "I'm living a life." Ryan scoffed. "Don't get defensive. I'm just saying people notice. Investors notice. We've worked too hard for you to get careless." Richard looked at his so-called friend for a long moment. "Careless?" Ryan held up his hands. "Come on, Rich. This woman Maya, she seems nice, I'm sure, but she's got a kid. She's from the South Side. She's not from our world." "Our world?" Richard echoed. He felt something crack in his chest. Not rage, not even hurt, just the dry, heavy dust of disappointment. "I thought our world was built by people who came from nothing," he said quietly. "People who didn't fit, but made space anyway." Ryan's silence said everything. Richard stood, tossed a few bills on the table. "Don't worry about the optics, Ryan. Worry about why you still think we need to impress the kind of people who'd see a child as baggage." He left the bar, stepping into the cold wind with his heart heavier than when he walked in. Maya was getting ready to clock out when her phone buzzed. "Richard, do you have a minute? I need to talk." In person, she stared at the message, then typed back, "I finish my shift at 7. There's a diner on 55th. It's quiet." When she arrived, he was already there wearing his usual coat, hair a bit messy like he'd been running his hand through it all day. He stood when he saw her. She sat across from him, not touching the menu. "What's wrong?" He hesitated. "I had dinner with someone who used to be a friend." She waited. "He doesn't think you fit in my world." Maya didn't flinch, not even a blink. "Let me guess," she said evenly. "Too black. Too broke. Too mother." Richard's throat tightened. I told him he was wrong. She nodded. And then what? I left. Maya folded her arms. I've had people say worse. To my face. Behind my back. I'm used to being not enough for certain circles. You shouldn't have to be. But I am, she said. That's the truth. When you date someone like me, Richard, you don't just sign up for juice boxes and coloring books. You sign up for judgment. For second glances. For whispers. For people assuming I'm using you, or that I should be grateful you even looked my way. I don't want your gratitude, he said. I want your trust. She looked down, then back at him. Can you handle all of it? The looks, the assumptions, the fact that you'll have to defend us over and over again, even to people you've known for years. Yes, he said without hesitation, because the only thing worse than being judged is pretending I don't care about you to avoid it. Her chest rose and fell, slow and deliberate. A server came by to take their order. Maya asked for coffee. Richard asked for the same. They sat in silence for a while. Then she said, my ex once told me that no one would ever really want me. Not for me. That I'd always be someone's compromise. Richard leaned forward, voice low. He was wrong. He said Caleb would scare people away. He's the reason I stayed. She blinked, looked away, blinked again. You say all the right things, Richard. He reached across the table, gently brushing his fingers against hers. That's because I've spent too long saying nothing when it mattered. She didn't pull away. Not this time. After a moment, she said, I want to believe you. Dab you, then let me keep showing you. Their hands stayed there, quietly tangled between coffee cups and laminated menus. And for the first time, Maya didn't feel like she was crossing into Richard's world. It felt like they were building something new together. Thursday came like a whisper, slow and gray. The kind of day that pulled quietly on the back of your thoughts. The skies over Chicago were the color of old pewter, and the wind carried that restless bite that hinted at an early winter. Maya stood in front of her hallway mirror, adjusting the collar of her dark navy scrubs. Caleb was in his room packing his superhero backpack, singing quietly to himself. She tucked a loose braid behind her ear, gave herself a long look, then turned off the light. Her phone buzzed. Richard, I've got meetings most of today. Dinner tomorrow? Just the two of us? I'd love to spoil you for once. She typed back. Tempting. Depends how many juice boxes you have in reserve. His reply was instant. Richard, unlimited juice boxes. Fancy ones. With real fruit. She smiled, slid the phone into her bag, and headed out. At lunch, Maya ran into Erin, an ICU nurse and longtime friend, who had the sharp eyes of someone who missed nothing, and the blunt honesty of someone who had no time for nonsense. So, Erin said, slipping into the seat across from her in the break room, is it true you're dating that Richard Callahan? Maya nearly choked on her coffee. I don't know what that means, but yes. Erin whistled. Girl, you really leveled up. Maya frowned. He's a person, not a promotion. I didn't mean it like that, Erin said quickly. He's everywhere. The man's in Forbes, Business Weekly, TED Talks. And now he's at Rainbow Park sharing apple slices with your kid. Maya gave her a look. You make it sound like he's slumming it. Erin raised her hands. I'm just saying, people are gonna talk. They always do. True, but you sure you're ready for that? For the stares, the side eyes? Especially from his side of town? Maya stared into her coffee. It wasn't that she hadn't thought about it. She had. Every time she walked into a room with him, every time she saw a server hesitate at the check, every time she caught someone's raised brow when Caleb called him Mr. Richard, with a familiarity that didn't match the usual script. She was thinking about that when her phone buzzed again. A message, not from Richard this time, but from an unknown number. Unknown. You don't belong in his world. Don't embarrass yourself. Or your son. Maya's chest tightened. Erin leaned over. Everything okay? Maya turned the phone face down. Fine. She wasn't, but she didn't want to talk about it. Not there. Not yet. That night, Maya couldn't sleep. The words from that message played on loop in her head. She knew it was likely someone connected to Richard's world, maybe a colleague, a friend of Heather's, a gossip with too much time and too little compassion. It didn't matter. It still cut. At 11:47 p.m., she grabbed her phone, scrolled to Richard's name, and hovered over the call button. But she didn't press it. Instead, she typed, "Do you ever worry we come from different planets?" She hit send before she could overthink it. This time, the reply didn't come right away. But it came, "Richard, every day. But I'd rather build a spaceship than stay on a planet that feels cold." Her eyes welled. She placed the phone on her nightstand and stared at the ceiling. Still, doubt lingered. Friday evening. Downtown. A rooftop restaurant with views of the lake and lights that sparkled like fireflies on glass. Richard had chosen it carefully. Not too stuffy. Not too loud. Intimate. He was already there when she arrived. Dressed in a dark sweater and slacks. Hair tousled just enough to look intentional. He stood when he saw her, grinning like someone who'd waited all day for this moment. "You look beautiful." She smiled faintly, sliding into the seat. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." Dinner was elegant. Sea bass for her, ribeye for him, a shared dessert of chocolate souffle Caleb would have declared yucky adult food. Still, Maya couldn't relax. Something clung to her. Richard noticed. "You're quiet," he said. "Just tired. Something happen?" She hesitated. Then, because if they were going to survive anything, it had to start with truth, she told him. "The other day, I got a message. Anonymous. Said I don't belong in your world. Said I was embarrassing myself." Richard's jaw clenched. "Who the hell?" "I don't know," she cut in gently. "And it doesn't matter." "Yes, it does. It matters that it bothered me," she admitted. "That some part of me believed it." He reached across the table, took her hand. "Look at me." She did. "You belong wherever you want to be, including next to me." She shook her head. "Your world has rules I never learned. Then we'll write new ones." Silence. Then she asked, "What if I can't always keep up?" He squeezed her hand. "Then I slow down." She laughed, just a little. "You're really good at this." "I've had practice, and regrets. I'd rather build something real than perform for people I don't respect." He lifted her hand, kissed the back of it, slowly. And just like that, the voice from the message faded, quieted by a louder, kinder truth. Later, as they left the restaurant, he placed his hand gently on the small of her back. "You okay?" he asked. She looked up at him. "I think I will be." And for the first time in days, she didn't feel like someone pretending to belong. She felt chosen. The gallery opening was meant to be simple, an invitation-only event for the unveiling of a new modern art exhibit, held in a renovated warehouse in West Loop, the kind of place where the walls whispered old stories, now covered in sleek paint and sharp lighting. Richard had invited Maya 2 weeks ago, casually over dinner. "It's nothing formal," he said. "Just a few donors, artists, and, well, the usual gallery gossip." Maya had hesitated. It wasn't that she didn't appreciate art, she loved it, actually, but she wasn't sure she was ready to be seen in his world. Not just by chance. Not just over brunch or at the park, but formally on his arm, in a space where every eye would know her name only because it was next to his. He hadn't pressured her. Come if it feels right. Tonight, she stood outside the building, Caleb already tucked in at home with Mrs. Clark from 2C, her dress smooth and simple black, elegant, respectful of the occasion. She took a breath and walked in. The room hummed with curated elegance. High ceilings, abstract pieces on tall white panels, champagne flutes balanced between conversations about brushstrokes and funding. Maya scanned the crowd and found Richard instantly. He looked up the same moment and smiled. God, that smile. He moved toward her with such ease it made her wonder how she ever doubted this man's sincerity. When he reached her, he didn't hesitate. He took her hand. Not forcefully, just enough. "You came." "I told you," she said softly. "You make a mean invitation." He chuckled, gently guiding her into the heart of the room. She recognized a few faces, men in tailored suits she'd seen on finance magazines, women with cold smiles and expensive shoes, but none of them mattered next to the warmth of his hand in hers, until she appeared. Heather, Richard's ex, tall, icy, dressed in cream silk and red lipstick. She moved like she belonged in a world where Maya still felt like a visitor. Heather's eyes landed on them. She approached with that familiar brand of practiced charm. "Well," she said smoothly. "Richard, and Maya, was it?" Maya nodded politely. Heather smiled. but it didn't reach her eyes. It's always interesting to see how taste evolves. Richard stiffened. Heather, no offense, she added, eyes flicking down to Maya's shoes. It's just refreshing. A bit rustic, but refreshing. Maya felt the words slice. Not deep, not sharp, just enough to remind her where the lines were drawn. But she didn't flinch. She smiled. I find that taste says more about the taster than the menu. Richard stifled a laugh, but Heather didn't miss the edge. Good to see you, Richard, she said, and walked off without waiting for a reply. Maya exhaled slowly. That was fun. He turned to her. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. She didn't wound me. She just reminded me why I usually stay away from rooms like this. You shouldn't have to. No, Maya replied, but I've learned to survive them, even dance in them, when needed. He looked at her then, not like a man embarrassed by contrast, but one in awe of a woman who didn't blink in the face of quiet war. Come with me. He led her past the main gallery into a smaller, dimmer room. Fewer people. One long wall with 6 large canvases, splashes of red and gray. Sharp lines like fractured stories. Local artist, he said. A friend of mine. Grew up in foster care, used painting to deal with grief. Maya studied the pieces. One had a child's handprint in the center, surrounded by waves of black brushstrokes. I know this feeling, she whispered. I do too, Richard said beside her. He stepped closer, his voice lower now. You don't just survive, Maya. You carry storms and still build shelter for others. She turned to him, her defenses low. You say things like that and make it hard not to believe. Good, he said, because I need you to believe something else too. She raised an eyebrow. I want you by my side. Not just in parks and diners and quiet corners, but here, in rooms like this, with all the lights on. She hesitated. I can't promise I'll always feel comfortable, she said. I don't need comfort, he said. I need real. The air between them shifted. I'm not used to being claimed, she admitted. At least not without being hidden, too. I'm not hiding, he said, and I'm not ashamed. Of you, of Caleb, of what this is becoming. Maya swallowed hard. You sure? She asked, voice tight. He reached for her hand again. Absolutely. And for the rest of the evening, he didn't let go. Not once. Not even when whispers followed them. Not even when Heather's eyes burned from across the room. Not even when an investor raised a brow during introductions. Later that night, as they stood on the gallery steps beneath the cold stars, Maya exhaled. Your world still scares me. Richard smiled gently. Then let's build one that doesn't. It was a quiet Sunday morning. Maya was humming softly as she folded Caleb's clean laundry, sorting socks that somehow always lost their partners. The radio played an old Donny Hathaway tune in the background, and Caleb was at the coffee table coloring a spaceship shaped like a pancake. Peace. That's what it felt like, something rare, something still and sacred. Then her phone rang. She saw the name flash on the screen and immediately felt her stomach drop. Detective Palmer. She hadn't heard from him since the day she signed the witness statement, the day she chose to tell the truth about a patient's suspicious injury that eventually exposed a quiet scandal inside the hospital's charity care program. She answered, cautious. Miss Williams, the voice came, calm but firm. We need to speak. In person. She glanced toward Caleb. Now? There's something you need to see. It's about Richard Callahan. 2 hours later, Maya sat in a small interview room at the station. The lights were soft, but the silence was not. Detective Palmer placed a brown folder on the table and slid it toward her. Inside, photos, documents, emails. Her name wasn't on anything, but Richard's name was tied to a recent whistleblower complaint from his former CTO, alleging financial misconduct during the beta phase of a now-defunct product, a major one, the kind that, if proved true, could take down more than just his name. I don't understand, Maya said, trying to breathe evenly. He never even mentioned that project. Because it was buried, Palmer replied, years ago, and now, someone's trying to dig it up. Do you think it's real? The detective leaned back. Could be. Could be a smear. Could be an ex-employee with a grudge. But if it's real, it's bad. Maya's fingers trembled slightly. Why are you telling me this? Because someone sent an anonymous tip saying you were close to him, that you deserved to know what kind of man you're trusting. She didn't know if it was concern or cruelty that had driven that message. But it didn't matter. The air had changed. That night, Maya sat in her apartment, staring at her untouched dinner while Caleb slept soundly in the next room.